Dr. Ilara Miles was a geneticist, rational, methodical, and grounded in evidence. She specialized in decoding what she called ancestral noise, strange inherited patterns in DNA that couldn't be explained by natural selection. One evening, while working late in her lab, she noticed something bizarre. In the genetic sequence of a patient with no known relatives, a set of repeating nucleotides appeared, GTCA, repeated 13 times, in a rhythm that seemed too perfect to be random. She assumed it was contamination, maybe a software bug. But then she found it again, and again, in subjects from completely different backgrounds, different continents, even different eras. As she dug deeper, her lab began to change. Lights flickered without cause. Her instruments malfunctioned only when analyzing those particular samples. Temperatures dropped inexplicably in just one corner of the room. Colleagues laughed it off, but Ilara couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, especially at night. Then the dreams began, always the same. A pale woman with no eyes, wrapped in chains, whispering in a tongue Ilara had never heard before. But somehow, she understood it. Words like punishment and blood echoed in her mind even after waking. The deeper she looked into the anomaly, the more it felt like something was looking back. She didn't know it yet, but she hadn't discovered a new gene. She had uncovered something much older, something forbidden. A message etched in blood. By a witch long dead, but never truly gone. For centuries, we were taught that witches were fiction, fabrications of fear, scapegoats for misfortune, victims of ignorance. And science? It was the torch that burned away that darkness, revealing a world governed by reason. But what if it didn't? What if something ancient survived those flames, not in books or rituals, but in blood? Beneath our microscopes and through our genome maps, scientists have started to see patterns they cannot explain. Sequences that defy randomness, inherited anomalies that whisper of pain, fire, and fury. They call them mutations, aberrations, junk DNA. But across continents and generations, these flaws appear in people tied, by coincidence or fate, to places soaked in witch trial history. What if those old curses were never just spoken? What if they were written into us? This is the story of one such pattern, one such curse, and the woman who found it too late. Long before science had a name, people feared something they couldn't see, but always felt: the bloodline curse. It was said that when a witch was wronged, burned, drowned, betrayed, her final breath could bind her pain to a family's future. Not just revenge for one life, but a punishment stretched across generations. Entire villages whispered of infants born sick, of sons driven to madness, of daughters hearing voices in the dark, always in the same families, always in the same places. The curse didn't strike once. It lingered, festering like a stain on the soul. These weren't just bedtime stories. They were warnings etched into oral traditions, scrawled into grimoires, and carried like secrets in the blood. And while most dismissed them as superstition, others, in quiet corners of the world, still believed the curse never died. It simply went dormant, waiting for someone to find it. Science once believed our DNA was a fixed code, set at birth, unchanged by experience. But that belief is fading. Enter epigenetics, the study of how trauma, stress, and even emotion can leave chemical marks on our genes, marks that don't change the code itself, but how it's read. Imagine grief, fear, or violence so intense it rewrites your body's instruction manual and passes that rewritten version to your children. It sounds like magic, but it's not. It's measurable. Survivors of famine, war, and abuse carry these marks, and so do their descendants. What our ancestors lived through doesn't just shape our culture, it shapes our biology. Now, some scientists wonder, what if ancient curses were never supernatural threats, but early descriptions of this hidden science? A curse passed from mother to daughter, father to son, not by spell, but by blood. In 2019, a small team of geneticists working under a private research grant stumbled onto something they weren't meant to find. Their project, officially labeled a study on inherited trauma, quietly shifted focus after multiple DNA samples from unrelated subjects revealed the same anomaly. A genetic sequence never before cataloged in any database. It was short, precise, and disturbingly consistent. They called it HEX13. It appeared only in individuals whose family trees traced back to sites of historical witch trials, places soaked in superstition, suffering, and silence. The more they studied it, the more the pattern seemed intentional, like it had been placed there, not by nature, but by design. Some of the team began to believe they had uncovered the biological fingerprint of an ancient curse. Others warned they were delving into something far beyond science. But curiosity became obsession. And then, the first disappearance occurred. A lead researcher vanished without explanation, leaving behind only a shattered coffee mug, a corrupted hard drive, and a warning scrawled on the whiteboard in Latin, Maleficium vivit, the curse lives. Those who carried the Hex 13 sequence began to report strange symptoms, none fatal, but all deeply unsettling. They spoke of vivid, recurring nightmares featuring shadowed figures and whispered voices in languages they'd never studied. One woman began compulsively sketching ancient symbols she couldn't identify, later matched to forgotten pages from 17th century witch trial records. A man awoke each night at precisely 3:03 a.m., standing beside his bed, whispering names no one recognized. Several experienced temporary blackouts only to find phrases written in charcoal across their walls. Phrases in Latin, Old Norse, even Enochian. These individuals shared no medical history, no psychological profile, no geographical ties, except one. Their ancestors had all lived or died in places historically linked to witchcraft accusations. It wasn't just genetic. It was as if the past were reaching through them, puppeteering memories that didn't belong to them, or perhaps had always been waiting in silence to be remembered. When the research team mapped the origins of each Hex 13 subject's lineage, a chilling pattern emerged. Every individual's ancestry intersected with regions where witch trials had once raged: Salem, Pendle Hill, Würzburg, Laudun. Places where fear ruled and fire was the answer to the unknown. Some were descendants of accused witches, others traced their bloodlines to judges, torturers, or executioners. The gene did not discriminate between victim and villain. It simply clung to the legacy of the event. It was as if trauma, like a curse, had imprinted itself into the genetic memory of those who witnessed or inflicted suffering. The researchers cross-referenced old trial documents, family records, and parish registries, finding impossible alignments. Test subjects dreaming of names that matched real historical victims. Sketches that mirrored trial seals never made public. These weren't coincidences. They were echoes. Scientific proof that something buried in bloodlines had endured, waiting, perhaps, for someone to dig deep enough to hear it screaming back through time. Obsessed with uncovering the full scope of HEX13, One member of the research team, Dr. Kieran Vale, proposed a controversial test to recreate the conditions surrounding the original curse. He believed the gene wasn't just a passive marker, but a kind of dormant mechanism, something that could be activated. Using historical texts, recovered chants, and bloodline-specific epigenetic triggers, Dr. Vale initiated what he called the ritual experiment. The process was never approved, never published, and those who participated have either disappeared or refused to speak. But fragments of the experiment survived. Recordings with garbled audio, scribbled notes in multiple languages, and a single image from a security camera, a figure standing inside a ritual circle, eyes rolled back, mouth open in a scream, though no sound was ever heard. After the experiment, the lab was sealed, computers fried, samples corrupted, and Vale himself was never seen again. What exactly was awakened in that room remains unknown, but one thing was certain. The curse was no longer content with memory. It had found a voice. Only one member of the original Genome team ever spoke publicly again, Dr. Ilara Miles. Months after the incident, she was found living under a false name in a remote cabin hundreds of miles from the nearest lab. When questioned, she refused to speak of the experiment. But she did issue one cryptic warning in a brief, anonymous interview. The gene doesn't want to be studied. It wants to be remembered. She claimed she still hears whispers, sometimes from inside her own reflection, sometimes from her blood when it pulses too hard in her ears. She avoids technology, mirrors, electricity. Her skin, once covered in faint scars from an old lab accident, now bears strange symmetrical patterns, like sigils carved in time. She says she's not cursed, she's a carrier, and that the curse isn't a punishment, but a message, one that each new generation gets a little closer to understanding, or unleashing. We like to believe science makes us safe, that knowledge protects us from the dark. But some truths were never meant to be uncovered. The HEX13 sequence has since been scrubbed from official databases. The research team's records sealed, buried under layers of silence. But the carriers are still out there, living normal lives, unaware that something ancient pulses beneath their skin. Maybe you've heard them speak in dreams. Maybe you've felt it too. An echo in your blood, a name you don't remember learning, a fear that doesn't belong to you. They used to burn witches to silence them. Now we map their ghosts with machines, but the curse never died. It simply adapted, and it may already be inside you. So the next time the lights flicker for no reason, or you wake with a phrase in your mouth you've never said before, ask yourself, is it stress or memory? This file was never meant to be found. A corrupted audio log recovered from the experiment's black box recorder. Only one phrase survived the digital decay, repeating, glitching, buried under static and screaming. A single voice, whispering the same words again and again. It woke up when we named it. No one knows what it is. No one has dared to say the name again. And yet, somewhere in the background of the tape, something else breathes.